Hi, I'm Ross Tayler. Welcome to Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. So pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today I'm excited to have Peter Paul Harnisch joining us on Sacred Sundays. Raised in a traditional working-class German household formed much of Peter's early awareness of life. Being a sensitive and intuitive child, he could not understand why no one talked about feelings. Conversations were more functional as feelings were ignored or brushed under the table. At the age of 15, something happened. While cycling one day, he stopped in front of Banyan Books, an esoteric bookstore in Vancouver, BC, and was fascinated by the window display. As he meandered through the aisles, two books chose him: The Awakening of Intelligence by J. Krishnamurti and Walden by Henry David Thoreau. He describes this period of his life when he cracked open and where his journey of higher consciousness began. To this date, at 67 years of age, his path of self-discovery never waned, as he had a deep yearning to know more about who and what he truly was. One of his major life interests is in the area of male consciousness, how males become deeply programmed and disconnected from their hearts, as well as how and why some men experience various levels of awakening. Currently, Peter is working on a project close to his heart, Man Book, The Inception of Consciousness, a book and future public exhibitions that involves creating black and white portraits of men accompanied by their stories of consciousness. He hopes that this book will in part serve as an example to other men, showing what a path of awakening can look like. As men are slowly awakening, they find that the path is often unclear and fraught with frustration and anguish. Man Book hopes to light the way, showing what other men have experienced as they become awake and more connected to the essence of life. So excited to welcome Peter to the podcast, and I feel it's important to say that I actually met Peter when I was living in the interior, and I attended a men's circle in Salmon Arm, and we didn't really connect at that circle. We just kind of crossed paths. And then it was, I think actually maybe a year or two later, that we were at an event that we had a common friend that was being celebrated, and we had a conversation at that event, and Peter reached out after that event and after I had moved to let me know about Man Book, and then I consequently invited him to be on the podcast. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Ross. So good to be here.
I wanted to start with a question, which is, who is Peter Paul Harnisch in relation to the sacred?
Well, for me, the sacred is ever present in my awareness and consciousness. I mean, to cite the coin phrase, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So I'm very aware most of the time of my connection to source energy. For example, this morning I went out to the lake, Shuswap Lake, and just as I do every morning, and I just felt her energy and just felt such beautiful presence. So I would say the sacred is ever present in my consciousness, in my relationship to the sacred.
Beautiful. I can so relate to that experience and my connection to nature, and how important that is to connecting to myself, because nature is just a reflection of our inner landscape as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so in your bio, I mentioned a couple things related to men's work, and perhaps we can start there. Tell me about your relationship to male consciousness and what it is exactly that you find fascinating, and what draws you to that.
Oh, I just got goosebumps through my body. What I find so fascinating about it, and have since I was 15, but not so consciously at that time. Like I shared, I grew up in a traditional German household, and there was no talks of feelings. And I was quite sensitive and empathic, but didn't know that at the time. I was just aware of all the undercurrents of emotions or feelings that were going on. No one seemed to want to talk about that. And not that I wanted to talk about that because it was more a fearful thing. You dare not mention the elephants in the room. So as I read, and especially, Krishnamurti's Awakening of Intelligence, and Thoreau as well, but in different books over the years, I became fascinated why, and especially the men in my household seemed so locked down. And, coming from that old school German tradition and the war years and such. So over time, as I learned and I fumbled along and became more conscious, the world, the sacred, um, my essence, my consciousness just over time began to blossom. And so, I've said for many years now that consciousness is the only game in town.
Mm.
And to become aware, to become conscious, is to have greater control of one's life and become happy, which I believe we're all entitled to live. So yeah, that's a broad topic, and I just can't get enough of it. I love talking about it to people. Last night I attended a men's circle and we had a good conversation. So to communicate for me about consciousness is really exciting and really important.
My family was from the Netherlands. And so it was similar energetically because my mom and dad experienced the war, and there was a lot of emotions that were expressed, but there wasn't
Mm,
necessarily feelings that were discussed or talked about. It was all really, that part was really never talked about because
mhm,
it just happened. And one of the things that you and I have in common, and probably many men, I mean, it's sort of reveals itself through this work, and that is that when I kind of interviewed my dad on my journey of trying to become more conscious, one of the first things he said to me about me was, as a kid, you were very sensitive.
mm,
And I didn't know what to make of that at the time, but it's making more sense as I
mhm.
move through my journey.
Yeah,
So we definitely have that in common.
for sure.
And I'm curious, what do you see on the other side of consciousness? So what is it that when you show up in a men's circle, and this
Mm,
is not to judge any man that shows
mhm,
up at a circle, but it's like,
mhm,
what does the other side look like?
mm. Yeah, I love that. And it's a process that I remember going through. I refer to it as spiritual ego. And as I learned more, book learned about spirituality, I realized at the time, and well, actually didn't realize it at the time, I realized afterwards that I started to become a bit judgmental in terms of, um, oh, they aren't spiritual, or they're not as far as long as I am, or all that egoic stuff. And just not too long ago, I worked for an organization where I had a 60-person caseload and of vocational and life coaching, and I found at times I got trapped in that. So what's on the other side is me softening to that, becoming aware that I was just judging on a different level, and letting that go. So the other side of that for me now is just, it's a sweet spot. It feels more present. It feels more loving. I could look at someone and they can share whatever they want, their suffering, and what have you. And I don't want to say there's zero judgment, but it may creep up on the occasional, but it's very rare. So the other side of it is just a sweet spot of accepting that we're all one. And I could see myself, my journey in every man I chat with. And I also realized that when I was feeling a little triggered or judgmental, it was an aspect of me
Mm.
that was being triggered and had nothing to do with them. Yeah, the other side is just presence and allowing, and just that kind of a soft, peaceful place.
And that really is the work. I
Mm,
worked in treatment centers for a while,
hmm,
and seeing people that are going through addiction and some of the intense behaviors that they create on
mm,
their path of addiction, it can be quite easy to bring up some judgment, and yet
yes.
to not have walked in their shoes and to not understand the potency of these drugs and what they do to you, and how
Mm,
all of the sensibilities go off the table. For me, that was a really powerful experience to
hmm.
deepen my sense of compassion and understanding. And yeah, there's still judgment and there's still layers because I don't think we're ever there.
No.
We're always We're
That's for
always
sure.
growing and learning, and
Yeah.
what I heard and what you said is that you also become kind of the template for others to look at
Mm.
and take from, rather than having to impose what it is that you
Mhm.
believe about the world and how people should be.
Mhm. That's a real important point where I used to want to not make, but almost force the issue and help, quote unquote, people become conscious and talk with men without being asked. And sometimes that didn't lead to a good place. But now I can just empathize and feel their struggle because, as I mentioned, I'm empathic, so I feel them. But now it's just such a beautiful spot, and I don't impose my will or neediness to change because I noticed that resulted or came from my family upbringing where I so desperately wanted my family, especially the men, to get it. And I was afraid to talk out. So as I grew older, I developed a bit of a neediness to try to change the world and have people become conscious. I mean, it's a great thing, but it's not necessary anymore. I can just allow people to be as they're going to be. And that's the most loving place.
Mm. You touch on a piece that I think is worthy of expanding out a little bit, the
Hmm.
neediness, because
Yeah.
my interpretation of that neediness is actually a nervous system that is trying to regulate in a world that is so dysregulating,
Mm,
and an attempt to tune the experiences that are happening around us so that we can
yes.
feel safe in the world. So as a sensitive, as an empath, it's
Yeah.
like, what do I need to do, or what can I change around me so that I can feel comfortable in the world? Which is, it makes total sense. And at the same time, it
Yes.
comes with so much backlash, I guess, because not everybody wants to adjust to what we need. And there's
Yes.
so much nuance to that. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah. So true, Ross. I love the way you phrase that. I just think there's a core within all of us that wants to help. I think it's
Mm,
the universe expanding into goodness. We want to help on some core level, and we want people to be happy. Why wouldn't we? We want the world to be good and safe. And so I think there's a natural impulse or inclination to want to help, but there's a caveat in there, and that's what we're talking about,
right.
where we can overstep and push the issue and yeah, so I love what you shared there.
And that is an interesting piece as well, because what you're talking about there is a balance between
Mm.
this way of either shutting down or
Hmm.
becoming too much, perhaps.
Hmm.
And I always think about that in terms of voice. It's like
Yeah.
we can suppress our voice completely, or we
Yes,
can take up space and talk so much. And so what you're pointing to there is like, how do I find the balance of all these things?
it's true. It's absolutely true, Russ. I've found that as well. It is a balance, and it's a constant teetering sometimes of that balance. But I think as we go along, we become more conscious of that process. And for me now, I don't dip too much into needing to change the world. I can just be present in it and enjoy life. This morning, I was savoring my environment and came home, and my partner was here, and I just loved her presence, and yeah. So it's there is a balancing act. Absolutely.
Hmm. It also reminds me of, I'm involved in a body of work that is referred to as human design, and
Mm,
roughly 90% of the population, according to human design, is meant to be responding to our environment. So it's like, we're not
mm,
initiating, we're not taking action, we're actually slowing down enough and listening and responding to what's
mm,
happening, rather than imposing our beliefs and imposing our thoughts. Like, we're invited in some way to share. And it's
mm.
such a conscious shift to step into that way of being.
Yes, yes. And what just popped up for me what you shared about invited to share. And I think as an empath, well, I can speak about me, but I assume, and falsely so at times, that because you're going to say something to me, or I read something on social media, that because they're expressing out in the world, that it invites me to be honest and share.
Hmm.
And
Right.
I've found many times that that invitation is not there. Sometimes they just want to vent and not hear my opinion. And I've been, been bitten in the backside so many times with that. And it's really an innocent thing. It's,
Hmm.
I'm not, at that point, I'm just kind of going, oh, this person wants a conversation. So blah, blah, blah. And then, oops, I've overstepped.
And that touches on, I mean, again, this could be a rabbit hole of a side conversation that I don't think we'll go down. However,
Mm, mm,
it speaks to the fact that so much of this communication is happening via text, and
yeah.
and there's so much that's missing in
Yes.
just reading words, and so much
Yeah.
assumption and so much missing information.
So true.
And that leads to what you're describing. And so it is innocent. It's not intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So tell me more about Man Book.
Mm.
Well, I already know about it. So tell
Yeah.
the listeners about Man Book.
Yeah. What it is, well, I've got a long history in photography as well, especially, black and white work, and I have a real love for it. So what happened is this idea came up of doing these black and white portraits of men that I know can be very poignant, and combining it with their stories of consciousness. And uh, part of that direction, or a big part of that direction, and I'm curious as to the inception, like when and where and how did a guy become conscious? When did that happen? And for me, it just came out of the blue. I was just cycling in the west side of Vancouver and happened upon this bookstore. I was like, oh, and I had no idea of consciousness at that time. Interestingly enough, though, at home, I was wearing Indian gauze shirts and burning incense. So I didn't know where that was going to lead. I just loved it. And it just happened. And I'm curious because everyone has such a unique journey. And we're talking about men in this example, and I know women have the same, but was that moment a person becomes conscious, and what that even looks like, and then how that evolved. I'm really fascinated by that, as well as, and I don't know if the book's going to go really into that, but I thought, why me? Why did I start to break open at 15 and felt like an odd duck amongst my friends? And why not others? I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole with that, but that fascinates me as well. So that's kind of the heart of how it evolved. And I'm super excited to be doing this. I've done some interviews, and I'm well involved with the project. A lot of men are interested, and it's building up excitement. So I'm super excited about this.
That's so great. And I love that your step into consciousness happened at Banyan Books. I love Banyan Books. It's one of
Oh
the
yeah,
things I miss having been in the interior or now on the island. I mean,
yeah.
it's just such a great spot. And often it'll be the first place I go when I go to Vancouver. So I just wanted to mention that.
Me too. Me too. And I don't know if you have been there. I mean, I'm a few years older than you, but I remember Banyan Books, the old Banyan Books.
No,
And it was such a cool place because the one I
mm,
went into, it had old slat wooden floors. The aisles were really close together, and as you walked the aisles, it creaked. And it was just had this beautiful vibe. The new store has a beautiful vibe too,
it
but
does.
the store was so cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So now back to the importance of what you were actually sharing, which is
Yeah.
about Man Book. And
Hmm.
what I loved about your share about this and your describing of this project is all of the sudden I could track in my mind, not just my initial step into consciousness, but I can think of all the other times of like the next up leveling of consciousness that kept occurring over time. And
Hmm.
that brings me into, I mean, what you're really, I guess, tapping into is the classic first step on the hero's journey, which is the tap on the
Mm,
shoulder. You know, that
mm,
that
mm.
nudge from spirit of like, hey, is this the moment that you're going to wake up? Is this the moment that you're going to say yes to this journey? Are you going to turn
Yeah.
around and face me and look at what you need to look at in the mirror?
Oh, I love
And
that.
I've had so
Yeah.
many of those moments in my life
Yeah.
over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And I think that I love that archetypal journey because it
Mm.
helps men to identify that pattern in their life if they
Yeah.
haven't already.
So true. And for my experience is because I have been a stubborn one at times in my life, I needed a rude awakening and a shock. Like I wasn't paying attention to those messages. And it's my belief the universe wraps things up until we get it. And it first starts internal nudges and hints, and then it eventually goes external into sicknesses and accidents and so on and so forth. And I mean, a small example, I used to be way back in my youth for 5 years, I was a Vancouver policeman and did not like that job, and I just wasn't getting out. And it took a motorcycle accident where I ended up breaking my back to wake me up. So talking about the universe ramping it up. And while I was convalescing in the hospital, I just knew right away I wanted to pursue professional photography. So after a year, I sold everything, packed up an old beater, and drove out to Boston, where I went to professional photography school and just gave up that career. Boom. But yeah, I seem to have to more in my youth, I seemed to needed to hit a wall at 100 miles an hour before I got something.
That's classic hero's journey. Are we going to answer the call?
Right.
And it gets louder if we don't.
It's so true.
And that's the hard part. I mean, it's hard to share that truth.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it is the truth if we look back. And I love your awareness of looking back on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
I had a similar experience. I was a volunteer with the RCMP as an auxiliary.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, I was stepping more into spirituality. And I realized very quickly that this was a paramilitary organization that was so opposite to me being sensitive and an empath and my path. And it was also a good experience because it tapped me into some confidence and ways of being that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But ultimately, I was confronted with a lot of men who were, I don't want to judge it because I think it's all part of the journey.
Yes.
But it wasn't my alignment. Let's just put it that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, I say when I share this part of my life with some people, it was like I was working in a sea of my fathers. And it was so true, that just locked down, male, aggressive, heavy energy. And I believe that we many times don't choose our professions consciously. We think we do, but there's an underlying driver. I realized afterwards, I didn't at the time, because all I thought was I didn't like it. But I realized afterwards, like, holy smokes, boy, was this ever purposeful and important and needed or necessary in my life.
Yeah. And there's two things. One, I want to go back and edit what I said a little bit because I did encounter men that were sensitive, men that were different than the traditional archetype. Yes. And I do believe that it's probably been about 20 years since I was in that organization. So I would imagine that it is changing and it's not the same as it was.
I would think so.
However, it's also a reflection of this paradigm of men, because in that organization, there's a closeness and a staying within that organization of like, you don't talk outside. Yes. And so it's kind of a reflection of what men go through individually as well. Anything you want to say about that? Yeah,
so true, Russ. There were a lot of good things. Like, I don't want to paint a totally negative picture. It's just my experience, but there was a lot of things when I quit that job that I missed, and that was the camaraderie. Yeah, the closest with men, and like you, I experienced some beautiful, heartfelt men who were also, I noticed, with being in the profession. I don't know what happened to them, and I also agree that I'm thinking that the profession has changed considerably. I've been out of it for so long, I wouldn't know where that looks like, but I would assume that it's become more conscious and heartfelt and inviting different men of different consciousness into the organization.
And forgive me if this is a repeat question, however, or if you've said it already, but what was your draw directly to men's work? Because you talked about consciousness, but I don't think you really named the men's piece.
Yeah. It just happened over time. I mean, the journey has been quite solo
Mm.
for me, going within and testing the waters and learning here and learning this. And then I lived on Salt Spring Island for 3 years, way back when. And when I was moving there, I had an idea of starting a men's group. And my partner at the time happened to know another guy who lived there and said, "Oh, it just so happens that so and so is looking to start one as well." And great. So he and I met and chatted, and yeah, we started a men's circle there that was so wonderful. I mean, it was well attended every day. I mean, every week we had 15 to 25 guys show up. And Salt Spring is a wonderful hotbed for a lot of conscious men. And it just happened. And then from there, long story short, same kind of thing happened here in Salmon Arm, where I wanted to start a men's circle, but I heard of someone else. We know this person who
Hmm.
also wanted to start one, and we got together as well as with four other guys, and we got her going. So yeah, it just appeared.
I love that. And it's kind of how it came into my awareness as well. I
Mm,
lived on the island and experienced the groups for quite a while, actually. And then when I left the island and went back to Squamish, it was like, oh, there's nothing here. And
mm.
I was like, I guess I'm going to be starting one. And so I did. So having been a part of that or witnessing these groups build and unfold,
Mhm.
perhaps there's things that you've learned that you might be able to reflect to men that hear this that are like, I would love to go to a men's group, but it's so hard because of, or,
Yeah.
what would you say to those men?
Well, I mean, coming from my background and perspective, I would definitely encourage it. They're a wonderful way to share openly where you're with men of a similar cut of the same cloth, and there's different levels of consciousness from men who are just starting to understand consciousness. Sometimes there's different religious backgrounds, and there's men who are more conscious, and it's a real support process where, I mean, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I had an experience where this one man expressed a lot of suffering with something he was experiencing in the family. And fortunately, this group allowed to have the men comment, which was, we were given permission to do so. So we had these men from different perspectives just commenting on their experience. And so there's a lot of learning that takes place, and learning for everyone. Like I've been well doing this, whatever you want to call, spirituality, delving into it for a long time, but I'm always learning from other men, and even validation for me is learning, where it's like I could see myself in every guy, a different
Mm,
aspect of my journey in every guy, and that actually just gives me such fulfillment. So I would really urge guys to. I mean, we've had guys come to men's group who are really locked down and angry, and that's cool. I mean, we had one guy once, it was an outburst, and it was actually a quite an intense outburst, and there was about 15 18 guys in the room, and no one said a word. They
mm,
just let this guy vent, and he just finished his piece, and it was quite intense. And then afterwards, he quieted it down, and he hung around and
mm,
talked with the other guys. And we ended up talking about that as a general group, and how we were just so taken back, I guess, and felt good about how we didn't respond to anger.
mm.
We just were present, and that was so powerful to feel that. So I would wholeheartedly encourage it. Just go once, just have a chat, because the
Uh-huh.
men are so accommodating and respectful. And yeah, I have found it to be a beautiful experience.
And you touched on a couple of important themes for me, which is the one that comes up the most often is someone will show up and share this big thing of like, this is what's going on for me, and it's so
Yeah.
intense. And
Yeah.
I will often, as the facilitator, ask the question of the group. It's like, can anybody else relate to what this man just shared? And
Mhm.
inevitably, every man puts their hand up because they can totally relate. And the man who shared has this experience of like, I literally thought I was the only one. And now I'm getting
Right.
this reflection of I'm not the only one, which is
Right.
in and of itself so beautiful, because I think that's what happens is we live our life thinking that we're isolated, thinking we're the only ones. And the moment we step into a group and into a community, we
Yeah.
start to get these reflections that you mentioned
Yes.
that we otherwise wouldn't have.
Yes.
And they can range the whole gamut, and right from, oh yeah, I carry anger as well, which is the second piece I wanted
Yeah.
to mention, is that anger is such a layered hot topic, right? Because anger
Hmm.
can cause so much destruction and can cause
Yes.
so much pain, and yet it needs to be expressed. It needs to be moved
Yes.
somewhere. And at the men's group that I run here in Nanaimo, I
Hmm.
think it was our first session, one of the men, he's not sure where he heard it, but this expression of anger is how men cry.
Mm.
And I was so moved by
Hmm.
that, right? Because it's like, oh, okay,
Uh-huh.
there's this anger
Uh-huh.
that comes out, and yet what is really wanting to be expressed? Well, we always say
Uh-huh.
sadness, but to say it in that way, it's like, oh yeah, this is the amount of emotion that's underneath the anger that can't
Mm.
be shown.
So true. So true. What you shared about, the men's group. Yeah, and anger, I mean, I see it now as any kind of emotions like that, well, which is quite an expressive one, as a sign. I mean, all these, feelings are signs. And for me, anger is better feeling than depression. Depression being locked down, anger
Mm-hmm.
is on the continuum of healing, but it's such a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know at first, and still, I can have some bells and whistles go off inside, some triggers when I'm around anger, because there was a lot of that in my family home. But I see it more for what it is now, and it's so valid that men can express that. The process is such a solo process that to realize that other men experience the same thing is just feels so good. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that's what happens. Last night we had a couple new men in the group, and they started to get really chatty after. At first they were very quiet and just observing, and then after they were opening up, and it was quite beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I would say that on my journey, it's less true than it ever was.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
years ago when I first discovered this work, absolutely, I was suppressing those things. I didn't know how to
Yeah.
deal with them.
Yeah.
And my commitment to showing up. And that's the thing. It's like you don't need to do anything but show up.
Yeah.
And you'll be
Exactly.
given these reflections. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to share. You can just be
Mm.
there and get all
Uh,
of these reflections from other men that are doing what they need to be doing for themselves. And eventually it starts to shift and change.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's so true about just being in the presence, because sometimes, I mean, I've witnessed guys who they just pass when it comes to the sharing, the roundtable kind of thing. And then at some point, 3, 4, 5 meetings down the road, they start to talk.
Yes.
And that can happen too. And it's great. It's really great when it happens.
Well, Peter, this feels like a good place to bring things to a close. And I always like
Mm-hmm.
to ask a question before we wrap up. And the
Mm-hmm.
question that I'd love to pose for you is, what's one simple way that someone could connect with the sacred today?
Mm. Well, there's a couple things that jump up. One be is to slow down and to become more aware of one's thoughts and feelings. And also, what I have done, one of my tools, is to become the observer of my feelings, and knowing that my feelings that may be very intense or don't feel good, that's not me. That that is something I'm experiencing, and I believe that it's something I'm creating. So yeah, I mean, in the past I've had an out of body experience where I was able to observe my suffering, and it was profound because my observer was loving and just peaceful, and my
Mm,
suffering body was just so intensely suffering. So I would say being able to observe one's thoughts and feelings and trying not to personalize it. And that's easier said. It took me a long, long time, and I still occasionally personalize it, but it's much less so than ever before.
I love that offering. Thank you.
Hmm.
And for people who want to stay connected or explore more of your work, where's the best
Yeah.
place for them to find you?
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that, or thinking you're going to share some of my links, but
Yes, absolutely. I will.
I'm just working on restructuring my website right now, peterpaulharnisch.com, and that'll be done within the next week to 10 days. And also, I have a Facebook page, The Unfolding Path, and so people can contact me there via Instagram. I do some YouTubes as well. There's a number of ways to reach out. If any man is listening and wants to kind of carry on the thought that might have ignited with our conversation, please reach out. I'm happy to share by email or have a phone conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And so grateful for this beautiful organic conversation and all the things that we got to touch on and speak about and the common threads in our paths, even though we're at different phases in those paths. I really appreciated being able to talk about those, and I'm sure others will appreciate being able to relate to them.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Ross. I really appreciated the talk as well. It's like I shared earlier on, it's just so exciting and meaningful to me to share fully from my heart without filter. And I felt we've done that, and I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, take good care. Thank you for joining us here on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. You can find more Sacred Sundays episodes, as well as other conversations from the Sacred Village podcast at sacredvillagepodcast.com. Feel free to share this episode with someone who might need it. Until next time, may your Sunday be slow and sacred. Bye for now.